Like and subscribe to PalsFundamentals on YouTube for more videos like this. Sources linked below. Welcome. Today we're doing a regional news report, a quick look at what's been happening recently in Greenland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands.
Yeah, we've got quite a mix. Some economic updates, social issues, bit of governance talk in Greenland, some environmental points for the Faroes.
And we'll finish off with a very quick Faroes weather update too. So let's jump right in. Greenland first.
Sounds good. So, starting in Greenland, you might remember that agreement between Greenland and Denmark for a historical review post-World War II up to now.
Right, that was agreed about 3 years ago, wasn't it? Looking into things like abandoned settlements, adoptions.
Exactly, sensitive topics. Well, DR is reporting that the work, it hasn't actually started yet.
3 years and no start. Why the delay?
Well, it seems like a few things. Daniel Thorleifsson and Tenna Jensen from Ilismatu were appointed to lead, but that was only last February. And before that, the commission itself was postponed in 2022 because of the election. Then there were apparently some disagreements about the research leadership. And then last year, the responsibility got moved around within the government from education to independence and foreign affairs. So sort of musical chairs a bit.
So what's holding it up now?
The latest is that Ilismatu, the university, needs to actually sort out a contract with those research leaders, budget, terms, all that.
Okay.
But they're waiting for feedback from the new Nälkäisyyssut, the government. And the government, well, they've said they want to reconsider the whole review.
Reconsider. So it might not happen as planned.
It seems possible. Vivian Motzfeldt has been asked to draft a new proposal for Greenland's side of things. So, yeah, still up in the air, really.
Okay. What else is happening in Greenland? I saw something about fuel prices.
Yes, quite a big jump. KNI, the state treating company, has put up liquid fuel prices by 85 year.
Which is about, what, 15–20%? That's significant.
It is. The Nälkäisyyssut approved it. Basically, KNI had been using its surplus funds to keep prices lower, but, well, that surplus is gone now.
Okay, so reality bites.
Pretty much. They calculated that keeping prices low would cost the Treasury about 130 million kroners a year. Over $500 million over 4 years.
Yeah.
Just not sustainable, they argue.
I bet people aren't happy. Any reaction?
Oh, yeah. The Nälkäisyyssut chairman, Jens Fredrik Nielsen, he acknowledged people are upset. SIK, the main union, their chairman, Jess G. Berthelsen, pointed to broken election promises. Nielsen said the intention was to make life cheaper, but, market prices, external factors, it wasn't possible to maintain.
Right. Okay, also on the government front for Greenland? Something about the UN.
Yes, the Nälkäisyyssut wants to apply for associated membership in the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO.
In its own name, right?
Yeah.
Not as part of the Danish delegation.
Exactly. The idea is to get into the committees, influence global food policy and guidelines directly. The Faroes are already an associated member, actually.
What does associated mean in practice?
It's generally a looser connection than full membership, maybe with fewer voting rights, but it gives them a voice. Greenland's already involved regionally, but they want to be at the global level where, rules often start before they become national law.
Makes sense, especially for raw materials and food security.
Yeah, and it fits into their broader foreign policy strategy for the next decade or so.
Okay, one more from Greenland, something about loneliness.
Yes. Down in Kokwata Kommunia, a couple of council members from Siumut, Malik Bertelsen and Hans Fredrik Olsen, raised concerns.
About what specifically?
They're worried about local communities weakening and particularly rising loneliness among the elderly and people with disabilities.
And they have a proposal.
Their idea is to make internet cheaper for these groups. They point out how vital it is now, for entertainment, staying in touch with family, even finding activities or work.
But they also stress it's not a replacement for actual face-to-face contact.
Absolutely. They noted the cheapest plan from TUSAS, the telecom company, is 499 kroner a month.
Which is, pretty steep for many people on fixed incomes.
That's their argument. They think TUSAS can afford it. They pointed to TUSAS having a surplus of 124 million kroner last year after tax.
So they've formally requested this?
Yes. They sent the request to the Nälkäisyyssut chairman, Nielsen, and also the member responsible for social affairs, Bentirak Odosen. They also mentioned the coalition agreement actually includes an obligation to offer services that reduce loneliness among the elderly.
Interesting. Okay, let's move across to Iceland. Big news on the banking front there.
Yes, huge news. The government sold off its entire remaining stake in Íslandsbanki. That was 45.2%.
Well, the whole lot. I thought they were planning to sell just a smaller chunk.
That was the initial plan, maybe 20%, but the demand through the public offering was just massive. It completely exceeded expectations.
Oh, massive.
Total demand hit ISK 190 billion. The actual value of the shares being sold was just over 90 billion. So yeah, oversubscribed by nearly 100 billion kroner.
Goodness. So they sold all 850 million shares.
They did, at a 106.65 kroner per share. And the price actually went up after the sale closed, ended the day at 115.5.
And they prioritized ordinary citizens in the offering.
Yes, that was part of the structure. Experts like Sharolfur Mathiasen praised how the sale was handled, called it well-structured, though he did add a note of caution about potential short-term speculation.
But the main point is the state is now completely out of Icelandsbanki.
Completely out, no longer a shareholder, a big shift.
Okay, sticking with Iceland, but moving to the environment. Whaling in the Westfjords.
Yes, a bit of local versus national debate there. An Ísafjarðardjúpsár council member expects about 5 minke whales might be caught near the Westfjords this summer.
By Cheltangi, the company with the license.
That's the one. They have a 5-year license, renewed annually. Now, the local municipality, Ísafjarðardjúpsár, they actually asked the ministry to ban whaling within certain conservation areas. They even proposed Skutulsfjörður as a specific whale conservation zone.
But the national government makes the final call on allowing whaling itself.
Correct, though local authorities can set certain conditions. Interestingly, the other big whaling company, Valur HF, run by Christian Lofsson, announced they aren't planning any whaling this year.
Why not?
They cited low market prices over in Japan. Meanwhile, whale watching is apparently growing in the Westfjords because more whales have been sighted there.
So it's a balancing act for the local council.
Definitely. The Marine and Freshwater Research Institute's recommendation, by the way, is for annual minke whale catches not to go over 217, so 5 is well within that. But Ísafjarðardjúpsár is clearly trying to manage the potential impact on their reputation and the growing tourism, hence the conservation zone idea.
Understood. Okay, let's head over to the Faroe Islands now. Government finances first.
Yes, the Faroes government took out a pretty substantial loan, 1.32 billion kroner. They did this by selling bonds, both domestically and internationally.
What's the money for?
Primarily to refinance an older, larger loan of about 1.6 billion kroner that's maturing next June. Also to cover budget deficits from 2023 and 2024, and just generally ensure national liquidity.
And the terms?
It's a 3-year loan maturing in May 2028. The nominal interest rate is 2.375%, effective rate slightly higher at 2.419%.
How does that compare?
It's actually lower than the rate on a loan they took out last May, which was 3.25%. So some improvement there, although rates have generally gone up a lot since mid-2022, increasing borrowing costs overall.
Was there good demand for the bonds?
Very strong demand, apparently. Landsbanki Faroe and Nordi handled it, and they said demand exceeded the 1.32 billion they needed.
Good sign. Okay, staying in the Faroes, but shifting to energy and environment. Wind turbines.
Yes, specifically a project in Klivaløkshaga, which is west of Sandsbygd on the island of Sandoy. The Overpreservation Committee, the Ivrefriðingarnefndin, is calling a meeting about it.
What's the plan?
To build 7 wind turbines there. The meeting's actually this Wednesday morning at the library in Sandur, followed by a site visit, and the public is invited to come and give their opinions.
Hasn't this project already got some approvals?
Sort of. The local Nature Conservation Committee in Sandoy County okayed it last year. And the company behind it seems to be one founded by Johan E. Neristovu, and others got a power generation license back in February.
But it was conditional.
Right. Conditional on getting all the other necessary permits. That includes the Overpreservation Committee, the Sands Municipality, and landowners. They need approval for the turbines themselves and the access road connecting to the main road.
So this meeting is a key step.
A very key step. The Overpreservation Committee themselves highlighted it's an important decision, weighing up both the environment and future energy production.
Okay, and finally for the Faroes, and this seems like a big one, the Suðuroyartunnilin. Lots of concerns there.
Yes, quite a lot of debate surfacing now. There's clearly significant political will in the parliament to spend billions on this tunnel connection to Suðuroy.
But the concern is about the environmental side.
Exactly, particularly regarding the access roads and the tunnel mounts. The worry is that there isn't enough money, or maybe time, being allocated for proper environmental impact assessments.
Leading to fears that
Well,
important nature could be lost.
that's the fear. that rare or significant natural values will just be destroyed in the process. The actual law proposal does acknowledge environmental consequences. It says they want impact assessments and strong environmental requirements for the construction company.
But the devil's in the details, right?
Precisely. How will those considerations actually be implemented? What specific requirements will there be? How will the assessments be structured and carried out? It's not clear yet.
There's a general issue in the Faroes with balancing nature and development.
Well, critics point to the nature conservation law itself, which allows exceptions unless significant societal interests prevail. And there's a feeling that societal interests often win out. Plus, Faroes' natural values aren't comprehensively mapped or even clearly defined sometimes.
So it's hard to assess the impact if you don't fully know what's there.
Exactly. Basic knowledge is often lacking, making it difficult to argue for protection when a big project comes along. Current environmental impact assessments, or EIAs, are often limited by this lack of data, and there aren't standardized guidelines, deadlines, or requirements for independence.
Some EIAs are done, though.
Yes, for things like electricity supply or under marine environment law, but they often end up being just descriptions of the current state. Few actual recommendations are made, and follow-up or monitoring is rare.
And the Suðuroyartunnilin law mentions considering impacts early, but
And construction could potentially start next year, and the project's been discussed for 5 years, so critics say early might have already passed.
does international convention play a role? Biodiversity.
Well, the Faroes ratified the Convention on Biological Diversity back in '93, but confusingly, the tunnel law proposal states it doesn't cover areas subject to international treaties, and this project is expected to cause significant biodiversity loss. So it's complicated.
The law mentions building according to Norwegian rules. Is that helpful?
Potentially, yes. Norway has very strong environmental protection requirements. Crucially, they demand thorough, standardized, independent EIAs before any permits are granted or final project placement is decided.
What do those Norwegian assessments involve?
They map everything: ecosystems, wildlife, geology, landscape done by scientific experts. They consider alternatives, detail how to minimize impact, like changing routes, protecting bird habitats, limiting work areas. They're public, transparent, and form the basis for permits with specific science-based conditions.
And they monitor compliance.
Yes, independent monitoring ensures rules are followed. Companies are liable for damage. They even do long-term assessments after the project to track changes.
So the call from Faroes environmental groups is?
It's for the Faroes Parliament, the Lichen, to specify the scope and requirements for EIAs for this tunnel before the law's final reading. They want legally mandated, standardized assessments, funded properly and conducted independently, probably by the Environment Agency, for Vistvan.
They're worried about assessments being influenced by commercial interests.
Yes, they point to examples like the Sandoy Tunnel, or even the Klivaløkshaga wind turbines we just mentioned, where they feel crucial aspects like bird migration weren't adequately considered because the assessment was funded or coordinated by the project developers.
So groups like the Environment and Nature Association, the Ornithological Society, the Hiking Association, they want clear rules, independent assessments, proper funding, and consequences for non-compliance.
Exactly. They believe this will lead to better outcomes for nature, more sustainable development, and probably less public opposition in the long run.
A lot to consider there. Okay, just very briefly, there was a cost mentioned for a visit by someone named Vance.
Yes, just a small note that came out. The visit apparently cost Denmark over 5 million kroner. Details beyond that were scarce in the report we saw.
Right. Okay, let's wrap up with the weather in the Faroes. What's it looking like?
For the next day or so in the Faroes, expect partly cloudy skies. There might be a few scattered showers around. Temperatures probably hovering around 7 to 10 degrees Celsius.
And the wind?
Looking like moderate northwesterly winds, so fairly typical for this time of year, really.
Okay, that brings our regional news report to a close. We've covered quite a bit economic news from Iceland and the Faroes, those social and governance topics in Greenland, the environmental debates in the Faroes.
And the weather, of course. A quick snapshot of what's going on across the region.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us. Like and subscribe to PalsFundamentals on YouTube for more videos like this. Sources linked below.